Like I said, it's not a comprehensive list. It's not in any specific order. Some of them might overlap a little bit with each other, and that's all right. What I really want to do is to give you the assignment of, as we're going through it, ask yourself the following. How am I contributing to this aspect of the culture of the church? So whether it's in your family or whether it's in the congregation or the organization, in wherever you have influence, what are you doing? Are you building up or are you letting things break down? All right, so like I said, it's just kind of an outline, a draft, you might say, and I'll use that as my word, as my acronym, to give you 6 aspects of culture. So skip a line if you're taking notes, and then write down drafts, D-R-A-F-T-S, drafts. And why the blank? Why did I tell you skip a line at first? Well, to insert a caveat, a little asterisk. Before I start talking about these aspects of building culture, I want to just say that culture is built on top of, in addition to, the underlying beliefs or the doctrines of the church. The doctrines of the church are the core principles, the foundation of what we build upon, and the culture reflects that, but it's not that. They grow out of it. Hebrews 6 lays out what it calls the foundational beliefs of repentance from sin, faith in God. It talks about baptism and the laying on of hands. It talks about resurrections and judgment. Those are like the foundational beliefs. But you can correctly believe those things and still not correctly contribute anything to the church at large. So let's just think about how we contribute things to our shared culture. All right, so the first one, the first facet of culture, the first thing that needs to be strong in order to have a strong culture in the body are D, distinction. Distinction, you can think of this as identity. This is embracing the fact that we are distinct, different, and set apart. The original word for church, which I'm sure most everyone knows in Greek, is ecclesia, which means to be called out to an assembly. We have been called out of the world and into the church. If you are here, it's because God called you here, out of the world. Let's go ahead and go to 1 Peter 2. 1 Peter 2, and we'll read verses 9 and 10. When Peter says this, says, you are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, his own special people, that you may proclaim the praises of him who called you out of darkness and into his marvelous light, who once were not a people, but are now the people of God, who had not obtained mercy, but now have obtained mercy. We've been called out of the world. You've been called. I've been called. Peter says, that you were called out of the darkness. You were called into God's mercy. Are you excited about that? Do you embrace that? Just over one page in my Bible, in 1 Peter 5:10, it says that God called you to his eternal glory. Are you excited about that? When I was a teenager growing up in the church, I wasn't so excited. I wasn't so sure that I wanted to be different. I knew I was different, but I wasn't so sure that I wanted to be. But now I sure am glad that I'm different. I mean, it doesn't mean that I'm great or anything. You're not great, I'm not great, but we are on a different path. You see what goes on out there in the world, but God has called us to something different. So can we embrace that fact? Do we know and do we love the fact that we are distinct? We should embrace that identity. All right, so the second one, R. R is for rites, as in R-I-T-E-S, like religious rites. You can think of this as, rituals, things that you do. These are doing special things with the group, with the body. All strong institutions have ceremonies and traditions that they do together, that they repeat over and over and over again. In the church, of course, you've got baptism, but you only do that once individually, right? But of course, we've got the annual holy days, that we keep the holy days together and we do something for each of those holy days. And we cycle back through that every single year. And we have the weekly Sabbath that we come and we meet together every single week. And because we live so far apart, we're spread apart, we create other things, excuses to come together. We've created rites in the church. Summer camp. How many of you went to camp or sent your kids to camp every year? The winter weekends, the annual hikes or the retreats, the monthly potlucks, the game nights, the chili feeds, the bowling night, the art painting, the whatever, We make these things up because we know what it says in Hebrews 10:25. I'm sure a lot of you could recite that. Not to forsake. We'll go ahead and turn over there. Hebrews 10:25 says, to not forsake the assembling of ourselves together, as is the manner of some, but exhorting one another, and so much the more as you see the day approaching. Another one of these that says much the same is Philippians 1:27. Philippians 1:27 says, "Let your conduct be worthy of the gospel of Christ, so that whether I come and see you or am absent, I may hear of your affairs, that you stand fast in one spirit with one mind, striving together for the faith of the gospel." We work together. We're coming together to work on this. By doing these things together over and over again, we build bonds like a family. So the next one is A, and this one is assurance. You can think of this as confidence, believing in the principles and the abilities of the group. Now, this doesn't mean you put your confidence in man. It means the exact opposite. What do I mean by that? Well, back in the first point, who called us out? Who put you here? Because that's who we put our faith in. We believe that God called us out and God placed us here for a reason, to do His will. Then we believe that we can have confidence in Him. We're right here in Philippians, and we can read about that. Philippians 1, verses 3 through 6. Paul talks about this very thing when he's writing to the Philippians. "I thank my God upon every remembrance of you, always and in every prayer of mine, making request for you with all joy for your fellowship in the gospel from the first day until now, being confident of this very thing, that he who has begun a good work in you will complete it until the day of Jesus Christ." Paul said he had confidence in them because God was doing the work. And we can have confidence, the same thing, in our family here, in the church, because God is doing the work. I'm a work in progress. You're a work in progress, but I am God's work. And I am confident that God will get me to where I am going when I need to be there. And so I can be confident that He'll do the same thing for you. So we should be able to rely on one another, that God will get us where we need to go individually and as a group. So we should have assurance. The next one, F, the letter F, is for form. Or you might put, the image of something. This is adopting the signs that show that you are a part of that culture, of that group. Groups tend to have signs and symbols. You know, there's a flag, I'm sure, on the post office across the street. It's an American flag. Is there a symbol? Yes, we have the church seal on the front of the podium. It shows that this is part of a group. Some groups have uniforms, you know, the police, the army. And, you know, we also have kind of a rough dress code. You know, we dress nice when we come to church. We're modest when we're out in the world. And these things are important. But even more important than having these outward physical signs, like the clothes that you wear or the symbols that we use, is what we are to put on as if it is a uniform to wear out in public so that everyone can see. So go ahead and turn to Colossians chapter 3, and we'll talk about something, or some things, some articles, you might say, that we are to put on. And we want to think of, if someone were to spend time with you, not just 2 seconds at the grocery store, but to come and spend time with you, are they going to see these things in your life? Do you bear this image? Do you make this impression? Colossians 3, we'll read 12 through 15. Therefore, as the elect of God, holy and beloved, put on, like you're putting on your clothes, you're going to wear this uniform out the door, put on tender mercies, kindness, humility, meekness, long-suffering, bearing with one another and forgiving one another. If anyone has a complaint against you or against another, even as Christ forgave you, so you also must do. But above all these things, put on love, which is the bond of perfection. And let the peace of God rule in your hearts, to which also you were called in one body, and be thankful. If someone spent time with me, went to work with me for a few days, hidden camera show or whatever, would they see that I'm merciful, that I'm kind, that I'm humble? If they went and followed you around for the week, would they see that you're teachable, that you're patient, that you're forgiving? Are we loving people? Are we thankful people? Again, we should wear these things like a uniform. It reminded me when I was writing this down of a story that my grandpa told about being in the war, and there was a particular guy in his unit who always just wore this big, heavy raincoat over his gear and everything. And anytime you'd see him going around, they'd be like, oh, there's Rent-A-Camp. Because he never takes it off. I bet he showers in that thing because he just never took it off. You always knew who he was. And that should be us. Not with a raincoat, but with these things that we read. Humility and kindness and generosity and patience and all these things. That should be us. All right, the next one. T for tradition. Or you might put in parentheses, a legacy. We should have the understanding that we are rooted in a tradition that goes back in time, and I might also add that should stretch forward into the future. We are one of a long line in this tradition. This way of life is not something that we've created for ourselves. This is something that we've inherited, whether if you were born in the church from a parent or whether you came in later from a spiritual parent or a role model. This is something that we have as a heritage from those who came before us. And it's something that we have a duty to pass on to those who come in after us, to our children and to our spiritual children. Let's go to Hebrews for this. Hebrews 11. And I know some of these in the faith chapter seems like a really high bar that we've been called to, but it is what it is. Let's read Hebrews 11. We'll jump in verse 32. And what more shall I say? For the time would fail me to tell of Gideon and Barak and Samson and Jephthah, also of David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith subdued kingdoms, worked righteousness, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the violence of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, out of weakness were made strong, became valiant in battle, turned to flight the armies of the aliens. Women received their dead raised to life again. Others were tortured, not accepting deliverance, that they might obtain a better resurrection. Still others had trial of mockings and scourgings, yes, and of chains and imprisonment. They were stoned, they were sawn in two. They were tempted, were slain with the sword. They wandered about in sheepskins and goatskins, being destitute, afflicted, tormented, of whom the world was not worthy. They wandered in deserts and mountains, in dens and caves of the earth, and all these, having obtained a good testimony through faith, did not receive the promise yet. Haven't received it yet. God having provided something better for us. We're in that group. I hope you don't get sawn in two. Hope I don't get sawn in two. But we are part of that group, that they should not be made perfect apart from us. Therefore, starting chapter 12, we also, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Again, that's part of the tradition, the legacy that you've inherited. And like I said, that's a high bar to meet. How are we doing? All right, and the last one, S, is for speech. This is the language that we use. This is speaking in such a way that shows that we are part of the group. And just like with form, there's a sort of surface level to this, and then there's something deeper. Now, the surface level to this are, the words and phrases we use. Hey, happy Sabbath. Hey, how was your feast? Or if you were a camper, you go to the zone at camp. And we have these things, and the initiated, those of us in the group, we know what we're talking about. And you say that to someone on the street, and they might look at you like, huh? Happy Sabbath. People going into the post office. The post office is closed today, right? Well, they're not going to the post office. But anyway. And these are good things, This kind of the jargon, the church speak that we have. They're not bad things. But there's a more important, a deeper level, just like with the form. It's not just the clothes we wear, but it's how we act. And it's the same thing with speech, what we say. Colossians 4:6 says that our words should always be with grace. John just gave a message, a couple of weeks ago about grace. What is grace? Well, in Greek, it's a gift. It's a gift. Are our words gifts to each other? In other scriptures, you can read, it says to speak truth, to speak comforting words, to speak words of faith. We're told elsewhere to edify, that is to build one another up with our words. Again, if someone were to go along with you through your week, go to work, with the kids, at home, with the wife, what would they say? Do our words help or do our words hurt? Do we compliment or do we complain? Are we comforting? Are we crass? Do we have words of life or words of strife? I'm Dr. Seuss up here. Ask yourself, how do I contribute to this? How do I contribute to this? Is it good? Is it not so good? All right, so in case you missed them, that was DRAFTS, drafts. Like a first draft, this is just some ideas to get us thinking about what we can do in our own lives going forward. D was distinction, R was rights, A was assurance, F was form, T was tradition, and S was speech. Strong, resilient groups and organizations build a culture that helps the members also be strong and resilient. It fosters a sense of identity, of unity, of family within the group. You belong with us, and we're going to go do great things. There's cohesion there. So let's all set aside some time. This is your homework. You know, your assignment while I was talking was to think about these things. So your homework is to go home and put aside some time to thoughtfully consider, how am I doing? How have I contributed to these things in the past? And how am I going to maybe improve in going into the future?